I struggled big time. And, it was all struggles that I could not forecast or foresee happening. They all just sort of like naturally occurred. And what I believe, it was like this ego that I had about myself that I wouldn't be the victim of those things.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Cazazzo, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with a Zeal. Today's guest is a retired Army Green Beret who served nearly 11 years with multiple combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. But his mission didn't stop when he took off the uniform. He became a wilderness guide, a mentor, and a healing force for fellow veterans, Gold Star families, and men navigating life's toughest transitions. He's trained others in emotional wellness, led backcountry expeditions, and helped run organizations focused on reintegration and purpose. And now he's the founder of Wild Ops Box, a subscription box connecting father and son through shared adventures. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited to introduce you to Aaron Blaine. Aaron, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. This is really cool. It's a good confluence of where I was and where I'm at now and what's most important to me. So when I read the title of your podcast, I was definitely interested in coming on.
I'm really excited to talk to you. So much to ask you in that bio in itself. But I'm going to start from the beginning, essentially, is what made you go Green Beret? Was Special Forces always something you wanted to do? Was military always something you wanted to do? Talk about the origins, essentially.
We talked about before the actual motivation or inspiration for me to join the military in general was to find good role models, male role models for myself. My brother and I lost our dad. I was 11 years old. He was 6 years old. It felt like kind of a journey to kind of understand how to develop as a man and try to understand what that meant and who to follow. And it was a very confusing and dysregulating kind of time in my life. And so joining the military to me in general felt like a way for me to remove myself from the environment that I was in my hometown, go beyond that and find men that looked like they were doing the right things. And, I think I always admired the uniform, and I think there's a lot to do with just service to the country. I have a lot of lineage. My grandpa's brother was a Green Beret. My grandpa was a tanker in the Army in Korea. My other grandpa was in the Pacific in the Marine Corps. And so I have a pretty big background lineage of military in general, to include the special operation. My uncle Don, I call him my uncle, but he was my grandpa's brother. He was a Green Beret, and Aaron Bank was actually his commander. And he had all these pictures of them jumping together. And Aaron Bank is who they named the building after at Fort Bragg, where you go learn language, and he's like the father of Special Forces. And so it's cool for me that it actually all came together kind of unconsciously for me. I ended up in the Special Forces because of something that I had always valued, which was just to find the guy who looked like he was doing it right and just go follow him. And I think that can thread throughout the entire story here in our podcast. And my dad was an exceptional man. And so, I grew up having a guy that to me was was my superhero. He did all kinds of things that I don't know typical dads do. He used to bury dinosaurs in the backyard for my brother and I. We spent a lot of time together. We built forts in the woods. And he just was always just a presence that felt great, to have around for my brother and I. And so when I lost him, the bar was pretty high for me. And I just wasn't finding anyone that even came close to the character of my father. And so I think that's what ultimately led me up to the Special Forces, which was at first I didn't have a ton of confidence. I think growing up without a dad, I think for anybody can be, you can definitely have a problem developing as a young man. I definitely had a lot of maturity issues. My mother took on the load of not having a father, so she worked 2 jobs. My brother and I kind of just raised each other. And so we just were winging it for most of the time. So I didn't really have much structure and honestly not a lot of confidence. And so, after I joined the military, it was like sort of an escalation of confidence, and to where there was just this point where I was like, wow, I'm actually interested and feel capable to go try this. And so I made it my life. So glad that I did. It really was like a rite of passage for myself to go in and to be selected to go on and to the special forces qualification course and make it through. And you're talking about like a kid who was probably at the very bottom of the high school like graduation list. Like I bet you I had 350 people ahead of me out of 355. Like, and so I just, I made a lot of mistakes. I got suspended a lot. I got in a lot of fights. I was constantly like trying to figure out what masculinity was and what my purpose was and what I was good at. And I never really felt like I had anyone to show me that. And what I figured out eventually was that you just have to figure that out on your own and go do it. And so that is essentially kind of a long answer to your question, but I
So
hope that's good.
at what point did you know, like, I want to go Green Beret? And then did you, like, were you a sports kid? Were you training at all to go, to get ready for selection?
That's a funny question. I don't think you could find too many people that know me that would say I'm athletic, but I am in shape and I know how to struggle and suffer. And I started weightlifting when I was probably in like the 5th grade.
Okay.
And weightlifting and running and any kind of physical activity was such an outlet for my anger and frustration about life and where I was. And so I think I naturally just like gravitated towards that like aggressive, physical activity. I wrestled, I played rugby after I, got, graduated high school. And so I was always just kind of like drawn to like more of the rugged physical aspects of life. Because of that, I got in really great shape. I was running a 2 mile in just over 10 minutes. I was at the top of my class in all my physical attributes, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, all that stuff. And then, eventually training with a ruck, I wouldn't let anyone pass me if I had a rucksack on. I was always wanting to be the first one to finish. And I think what that really comes down to was like my physical fitness or my physical abilities was something that no one could ever really challenge or take away from me. And then all the other things I was still trying to develop in. I was still trying to understand, in terms of a tactical mindset. When I went into the special forces, I had no infantry background. I had not a tactical mindset whatsoever. So everything I learned was actually in the course as I was being graded on it. So lucky enough, I had really great mentors and other guys that were able to kind of show me the way and at least teach me the bare minimum. And then I kind of went on my own and eventually honed those skills and, and those tactics along the way.
Did you have any rollbacks?
Actually, yes, I did. I didn't have any up until the very end. And the MOS portion, which was I was a 18 Bravo, the weapons part of it was very overwhelming. And I think we started out with like 50 guys in the class and then only like 18 of them went on. And so then we all basically got pushed back a cycle, which really is an interesting thing because it was like this constant threat of like, if I got pushed back again, you're done. Like you can't recycle twice.
And it's the end. It's the end.
Yeah. There's really no question after that. And so what that made me do is like just ride that stress line of like knowing I better do the damn best that I can the rest of this course. Even through the rest of the course, I had some close moments of, we did mortars and, math is not my, is not my best aspect of education. And so, doing the plotting boards and trying to learn how to essentially drop a mortar somewhere, using just manual tools like a plotting board was very difficult for me. And so I think I got like a 71% and you have to get a 70 to pass. And it was like, holy crap. And, I made it all the way through the rest of the course without any other infractions. But, that's always during the course, like at the top of your mind is it's like amazing accountability. And it's like, you know, that at a moment's notice and you let your guard down for just a second, you can be toast. I thought that was really cool and really stressful at the same time.
How did you like personally like navigate that stress?
I don't know if I was born this way or if I just created it over time, but compartmentalization has always been very
Gosh, you
easy for
guys and
me.
the compartmentalization.
I would say that I'm probably expert level at compartmentalizing, and what that does for me is it gives me a lot of focus, and I can like push everything aside just
Mm,
to move through to get to that target. And so
yeah.
that's one thing that I think I've always been really good at, is being, super highly focused on something to the point where, like, failure is not an option. That's how I dealt with that. And I'm sure I dealt with the consequences of that at a later time, which, it always catches up with you somehow. And I've learned about that through, the last couple years of integrating back into, the real world.
Before we go into the transition into the real world, what did when coming from someone that didn't have father, right? And you essentially, like you mentioned, you and your brother raised yourself in the sense of, your mom took on so much.
Yeah.
And what did being a Green Beret and going into the service and stuff like teach you that then carries with you now, or that you wish you would have or could have learned maybe when you were younger?
A lot of different parts to that question, but I think like what holds true to me to this day, that like was the very beginning of my journey, was just like to find the guy that looks like he's doing it right, follow him, follow them, try to aspire to that higher level, and don't get lazy. And I think for me, mentorship has just been so important to me that I constantly seek it out. And so I know that I don't have all the answers. I don't want to have the ego to pretend that I can just figure everything out. And so through the military experience, I always found the guy that looked like who I wanted to be like. I'll just say his first name. There was a guy named Jordan, who was a teammate of mine, who just like embodied all of that for me. He was always talking about being healthy spiritually, being healthy mentally and physically. And it's like, all right, cool. Like those are three things I can like really go for and try to be good at. And I saw that he was legitimately doing that. And so, we're friends to this day, and I still look at him as a mentor. He was just one of the early people that I can remember being like, you know what? I see the way people look at him. I see the way
Mhm.
people treat him. I'm going to hang around him and watch. I want to figure out the cheat codes. Like, what is he doing that I can learn? And I've continued that process post military of just like, I don't know the answers. I don't know how to start a business, but I'm doing it. And I'm asking everybody in the world to help me. Not only to help me, but like finding those guys or even, gals that have a skill set that are like really ready to share that to the right person
Mhm.
who's hungry. And I'm super hungry. And so I am really good at like connecting and finding those people. And that's the only reason I will ever be successful, is the people that are above me, that are giving me the, at least the guidance to move towards something.
Okay, so I have to ask you this question because it just sounds to me like you have this like go getter, like, I'm going to figure it out. I want to be the best. I want to be at top. I want to learn, you know. So, what made well, not made, how did you end up like 350 out of 355 in graduation? And I ask that because I'm sure there are some people on the show that are like, you know, or maybe their kid that some of this isn't struggling in school or something like that, or like, so I'm just curious for yourself, in terms of how you were there, and then
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question, an emotional question. So lacking development in that period, like that formidable time in my life as especially a teenager, I
yeah.
made a lot of poor choices. Those poor choices sort of spiraled me down into what I believe was probably severe depression as a high school kid. And covering that depression with alcohol and drugs, and just finding ways to to cope with what I was dealing with. And, back in the, early 2000s, no one was talking about mental health. No one was talking about support. No one was talking about going to a therapist or, working on yourself. And I'm sure that high school kids aren't thinking about that anyways. Everything that coalesced in terms of what I perceived as failures were just really dark moments of my childhood that I didn't know how to deal with. Yeah, losing my dad was the beginning of that. Not having any structure or accountability from anyone kind of led me to hang around the wrong people and probably even put myself in a lower class than what I deserved to be in. So basically, like having a really poor mindset about myself. And here's the thing that's nuanced about that is that I always knew that I would be good at something. And I knew that. I can remember thinking about it like, I'm very capable, but why do I feel so dumb? Or why can't I get good grades? Or why can't I, be the starting, linebacker on the varsity football team? It wasn't because I wasn't capable. It was because of this story that I had in my head that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough. And, one thing that happens that you probably don't hear people talk about is that when you lose your dad, you're sort of not purposefully, but you're cut off from the community in a sense. And so what I saw is like all of my peers and their fathers sort of pass me along the way. And I don't say that in terms of being a victim. I don't have any like ill will towards, folks that were around me that, were my friends' dads or whatever. But like, and maybe it was a story that I made up, but what it felt like was that everyone just sort of just kept passing me. I'd go to school and like all of my friends would know like, hey, this is going on now, or this is when you go get your football pads, or this is when like school pictures were. And like having a really busy mom and no dad, I was kind of just like standing around sort of oblivious of what was going on. And so that caused me to go even deeper into like confusion and just not knowing like, where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to be doing? I had no idea as a kid. That was incredibly difficult, but the way that I look at it now, it was just this catalyst, this early catalyst of like me being so contemplative and like also very secure about doing something well, but just not knowing what it was. And so just needing to find that outlet along the way. And I felt like the military was a good start.
Would you say that giving yourself that, I guess, best way to say it, like direction in terms of a plan, like, hey, I'm going to go military, yeah. I'm going to go special forces, I'm going to go this route. Did that help pull you out of that dark spiral that you were going down or that depression? Yeah. At what point did you come out of that?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that question in journaling and reflection. And I think, I know that it really set a new stage of like, I guess like starting over for me. Was just being able to start over, but with like the ability to be around like-minded people. What I always tell people, what's incredibly easy about the military is that they tell you where to be, how to be, what to wear, and you just go do it. And it's easy to be really good at it if you want to be. Okay. And I think the U.S. military does a really good job of taking kids with no structure and no support and then putting them into that pipeline in order to make them, extraordinary people. But to answer your question at a deeper level, what I remember feeling and what I've been reflecting on personally in the past has been traveling the world and going places and seeing new things. It's brought me out of this like depression.
Yeah.
Of, one of my first duty stations was Morón, Spain, and I had never been overseas. And so to be like 19 years old in Europe with like a rental car and 4 or 5 days off, it's like, it blew my mind. It was like, holy crap, like I can go do whatever I want. I think the other part of that is that like the Army, or at least the military in general, it really does a good job of blending like misfit people into this situation to where you become instantly like best friends with everybody that you that you meet. And so it's funny, like the guy that I roomed with in Spain, we got into a massive fist fight one night. And now, like, he came out here and hunted with me this spring. Like, we're best. We talk almost every single day. And so it's like, I think, like, for me personally, it was like my identity as a kid growing up in a small town in Ohio had kind of felt like he's the broken puppy. He's like the kid who doesn't have a dad that everybody should just be like, "Oh man, like, how are you doing?" And it's like there was never a feeling like I had the ability to move through that where I was in my environment. And nobody had the intention of like making me feel poorly or bad. I think that just over time, not wanting to be a victim and just wanting to be a normal kid with a normal family. All my friends had moms and dads. Back then, not everyone was getting divorced. And so, like, most of my friends had a very intact, family system. And, I was always very jealous that I did not. I went home to usually an empty house, or my brother was there, or, somebody might be there or might not be. I may be making my own dinner at, 14, 13, 12 years old. It's just a different lifestyle. And I think for me, after tons of reflection and work, I really just, I wanted so badly to be like my friends that I didn't want to express any of what I was going through. I almost led like a double life in a way, because like I was embarrassed that I didn't have like a curfew. Like, so I would just like make up, oh yeah, I have to be at home at 11:32. And then I'm like, actually, no one cares when I come home. I mean, of course my mom does care, but like there was just so much it was a loose living situation. It was a loose upbringing. My mom, she was trying her best. She was working third shift. She was working during the day. And I think back on it and it's like, she was 33 years old when my dad passed. And I'm like, holy crap. Like I was 36 before I even thought about that and like the reality of like what she was going through.
Yeah.
And so this isn't to like, nothing against my mom, but it's like, it to me, it speaks volumes to like a fatherless household in general. No matter where you're at, no matter, what the socioeconomic situation is, there is a lack of development. And then there's a void that essentially is really difficult to fill.
So I do want to ask you a question. I sometimes don't go in order, by the way, based off of what you're saying. So now I feel like this is a perfect time for me to ask you about Wild Ops Box, the
Yeah.
subscription box that's connecting father and son through shared adventure, because that, I mean, it sounds awesome. Like, it sounds really cool. And, and you talked about, that, I mean, we've talked the whole like an episode on the fact that, on how this really spiraled into, where you are today and the person that you are, right?
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned the fatherless household and structure and that needs to happen within a family, right? So what was the inspiration behind this? Do you have a son?
I have two.
You have two. Okay. Hey. So do you use this with them? Did you create this
Yeah.
for them, or did you also create it for like the little boy that went through what,
Yeah. All of the above. Yeah. All of the above. Yeah. So, when I first started to build Wild Ops Box,
Mhm.
it was more so because I realized that doing these things with my kids worked. That was like the initial inspiration, was like I took my kids into the woods and we built shelters, we built snares and traps for animals, we fished, and it was like once a week, and I promised my oldest son this like 2 summers ago. Every week we'll go do a new skill. Every week we'll go teach another like self-sustaining like survival skill or self-reliance skill or bushcraft or whatever it is. And my son Easton literally went crazy with it. I mean, he is like full on like feral child in the woods, and all he wants to do is survival stuff. And so because I was able to introduce that into his life, he's a wild kid. and he needs something like that. School doesn't work for him either. Like he's okay at it, but he has serious attention problems. But I'll tell you what, if you put him in the woods and tell him to build a structure, like you'll be able to sleep in it and stay dry, and he will love doing every that was the initial inspiration, was realizing that like this one summer really made me feel immensely connected to my kids. After like 4 or 5 years of me working and grinding all summer long, because I used to guide, I wasn't ever around very much. I was thinking and looking for something to basically make up for lost time and also feel good about being a dad. You know, I realized that like a lot of these skills were skills that I'd learned in the military, but they're also an extension of the stuff that my father and I used to do with my brother. You know, my brother and I used to do with our dad growing up. On a timeline, it's like, yes, I did it for my kids. I realized that it worked. I'm also doing it as a homage to my father, and then like the more deeper part of it is myself as a kid.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's a cool like I want to send it to my brother. I mean, my nephew's 3, but
Yeah,
you know, it's just cool to have that bonded experience where it's beyond. I don't know, for myself, I don't have kids, but I have a nephew, and like
yeah,
I'm with him several times where like I'm like watching him for like weeks at a time, and I don't like the TV thing. Like people are
no,
like, "Oh, that's how we bond." You know, we have family TV time. I go, "You can't even talk. You can't connect. You can't
yeah,
like, you know, I like to go out and do things. Like, and right now I'll do like a science museum or like, you know, things like that.
yeah,
But, you know, I just feel like getting out there, getting kids to play, getting kids to learn through adventures and things like that is a really cool bonding experience. And also, I don't know, maybe you could share this. Do you feel like it opens up communication that you wouldn't have outside of that?
100%. I mean, I could go on about this question for days, but I am fully confident, specifically with boys, but I think it also extends to little girls too. If you put kids in the wild, in the woods, with a task, allow them to do it on their own, I would say that that trumps any sort of educational, you know, system, any course, any class that you're going to take. I think people in general, if you think about it, they don't want to sit in a classroom and learn by looking at a board and listening to a person. They want to learn by doing it. And like I've listened to, you know, several different experts. I don't claim to be myself, but there's a guy, I think his name's like Daniel Schmachenberger. I can't really pronounce his last name, but what he said in one of his podcasts really was interesting to me, and it ties to what we're talking about. And they asked him why does he think his IQ is so high? Because he had one of the highest IQs like on the planet. And he said, it's because my parents taught me things. They homeschooled me. They taught me things. And not only did they teach me, but they made me practically apply what they were teaching me every single day. And I think that is what's happening with kids in the woods. That's what's happening with my son as I'm like building a shelter with him, is that he's learning something, and it does open up this like mass portal of connection and communication. They are ready to learn. I mean, they're so intently prepared to do whatever you tell them to do. They're looking for structure.
Mhm.
And it is so easy to see that it's working, and that's what gave me so much inspiration for the project. And I will tell you that my son's behavior like went through the roof. He became so much more independent and responsible. He decided to start doing his own chores. He has like 4 different yards that he mows, and he cleans up dog poop throughout the whole community. And he's 8 years old, and he's making $500 a week, you know? So like, I noticed that like
Wow.
his development skyrocketed after one summer of these skills. And so when I saw that that was the case, when I look at Wild Ops Box, I think about it as a social impact project that happens to be for profit. But like, I don't care if you don't want my product. I want people to want the product because it's not really the product that's inside the box that's going to support all of these needs and support all of this development. It's a vehicle for the intention for a dad, a mom, a grandpa, an aunt to connect with a child in a really meaningful way and build some like amazing lasting memories. All of my memories with my dad is starting fire, building forts, fishing, and I don't think that's exclusive to a guy who lives in Montana. Like, I think we naturally as humans are wild and want to be outside. And the other part of it is that it teaches so much self-reliance. Like, it's literally teaching kids how to survive and problem solve. And I think that if you teach them that in nature, it just spreads throughout their entire life, and to where they can problem solve, on the computer based on their past confidence of problem solving while building a fort, or, procuring water and sanitizing it, or, preparing game food or whatever it is. It's difficult. You see all these videos of people making these delicious meals in the woods, and it's like, it's actually really difficult to do, no matter how, and it looks beautiful when they do it on Instagram. And I'll tell you, that's nearly impossible. But like, anything that you do outside is exceptionally harder than what you'll do inside. And so I think it's just such a high bar to teach. And then the aftermath, or the second, third order effects of that, are that they're going to go into the real world and apply those skills to just everything.
I agree with all of that. That it's, I mean, I really want to look into it too for my nephew, because I'm always looking for things that are going to, like you talked about, it's great for developing him socially, and also to be ready, like, to get those skills for the real world. I see so many times kids. I remember when I was a server years back, and if a kid like looked me in the eye and ordered for themselves, I wasn't supposed to do this, but I went and I got them a cookie, and I was like, this is, a treat, like, I was like, and I would ask the parents, I'm like, hey, like, your child like ordered for themselves, which, by the way, was like rare. I mean, like, once, like a month or every 3 months did I give, and this is Los Angeles, so it's just like, it was a very busy restaurant. Like, we always had different people all the time, and it was really shocking on how many times a kid's face was in the phone, how their parents ordered for them, things like that. And then you just wonder, like, how they're going to do as they get older when they can't even do that at 8.
And I think we're already seeing the effects of that right now.
Yeah.
And then, on top of that, communication has gone like completely out the window. You can already see that kind of developing into, adulthood, the lack of confidence, like you said, someone looking you in the eye, or just independently moving through something. We've been having our kids, if they want something and we're at a restaurant, they have to walk up and order it themselves. If there's like a counter, if we go to a gas station and my son wants a drink, he has to go pick it out and go buy it himself. I would even go steps further at times where, my son, my 8-year-old, will order for the entire table. He'll order for me, my wife, and his brother. And so, like, the more that you can get your kids to, and here's the thing, they're going to mess up, and that's good.
Yeah.
I think that's the big problem right now, is that people are so scared to screw up, so scared of failure, that they don't even want to attempt anything. And it's really the opposite, where failure is like what propels you forward. I would have never lasted in the special forces if, I was really kind of an anomaly. I shouldn't have really made it through, having the lack of skills and knowledge that I had at the very beginning. But because I was just kept showing up and saying, show me what to do, show me what to do, show me what to do, I figured it out. I may not be the smartest, but I am the most persistent. And so, I hope that my product is a catalyst for kids to build that social confidence, like what you talked about. And then also just the confidence to problem solve very simple things.
Yeah.
And to connect with nature. I mean, I won't get too woo on it, but like, that's my spirituality, is being in the woods. And I can't imagine being in a better place than, a forest or a meadow, or, just in the middle of nowhere, doing something fun with my kids. And so it is a spiritual aspect of mine too.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Thrivers Coffee. Podcast guest Nick McKinley's company, Deliver Fund, brings you guys Thrivers Coffee. It is ethically sourced, it's organic, and it supports traffic survivors. That is right. Thrivers Coffee is all about empowering us to making a difference in the fight to end human trafficking. That's why 100% of the proceeds go directly towards their goal of bringing freedom to victims of human trafficking. So if you guys love coffee that is organic, ethically sourced, and tastes absolutely delicious, and want to help to end the fight of human trafficking, check out Nick McKinley's company, Thrivers Coffee. Yeah, it's interesting on like the studies that come out too. Like, I mean, we're spending most of our time indoors, or sitting down. We're spending most of our time sitting down versus, being outside, having our bare feet on the ground, all that stuff, because there is something that shifts within you that's why people say, like, when you're like overwhelmed or when you're down, go outside, get some sunlight, walk around, things like that. It does something for you, and then to be outside in nature where like nothing's around you but you connecting to what's around you, it's really powerful. And I think what you have is really amazing. It's really, and I'm for everyone that's listening, I mean, if you have the website and stuff, I will link it to this episode as well.
So there's a landing page right now, and it's just wildopsbox.com. There's a landing page. I would love to hear from people what they're interested in, maybe jump on a waiting list. We're going to hopefully have the website complete and be ready to go to market by September at the latest. And so it's been a long process, but the reason that it's been a long process is because I've really taken my time on it. It's something that hasn't died in my spirit at all, and I don't want it to. And I've been part of startups. I've been part of the grind where you're literally just like sacrificing all of your time and energy to get something moving. And it's kind of like building the plane as you fly it. And
I'm a queen at that.
Well, I refuse to do that. I'm very stubborn, but at 40, I've realized I can't do that anymore. And so I've just been like building this one day at a time, 1 hour at a time. And like all of a sudden it's here, like we're almost ready to launch. And so if people are interested, they can go to the landing page. It sends a direct message to me and ask me anything, request anything. I'd love to hear from dads, especially those that are in like more urban environments, of like, how can I support you? What do you want to see in the box?
That was my question, by the way, because we're urban.
Yeah.
Los Angeles, urban. So it's like, as I think about what you're saying, I'm saying to myself, I don't even know where we would even go aside from like the beach where we, or the park or something like that. But, it's not like we're going to drive to Big Bear. We could, but, to be able to just like, hey, we have the day to go out, like spontaneous, to go outside, like what in an urban area are things that we could possibly do within this, subscription, because it sounds awesome,
And my hope is to be able to make sort of like a hybrid product or something even completely separate for urban environments. And listen, it's like what comes in the box is going to be great. However, it's the intrinsic value that I'm basically selling here. I'm boxing up some intention and some guidelines and a vehicle for you to step aside from a busy life and connect with your kids in some way that involves nature. And so it's mostly education, and here's the thing. I feel like I'll have just as many people interested in following the journey of Wild Ops Box than will even need to have the subscription. Because what I plan to do is not just have a subscription that makes me money. I want to build this massive community around Wild Ops Box that is intentional parents, intentional grandparents, caregivers that want a tool or a resource for their children or their grandchildren, their nephews and nieces, to just move along and support each other through that community. I think is a really awesome thing that is going to develop from the brand itself.
So let me ask you, with the everything that you're doing and being a father as well, like, what would you say in terms of, because I do feel like fathers need to be present. They're very, very important. They're essential in children's lives. What do you feel like we're either missing today, and what do you feel like um, is, I guess, not detrimental, essential, I guess, in for children and their development as a father?
We have a lot of different things going on that's like working against us. Our rat race to happiness is this trap that a lot of men my age are in, to make a lot of money and to be a certain status. And I don't say that from judgment. I just say that from awareness in general. And, I have friends and people that I am very close to that live that lifestyle. And that's their choice, right? However, I think that there is a huge funnel of that mentality that impedes us from being able to connect. I think one thing is that we're so distracted. We're so distracted by our phones. We're so distracted by technology. I would even go as far as to say, like, organized sports are very distracting because, I have 3 or 4 buddies that complain to me constantly that they're running around town. They're spending, $300 a week on gas getting their daughter from, volleyball, and then their son to soccer, and then their other kid to, whatever sport. And they're running around trying to get dinner made. Maybe the husband's not even present. Maybe the husband works, 100% of the time, and the mom is doing it all. I think we have created this system that I know personally does not make sense for me. I don't think soccer or baseball or football or any of those organized sports are making a lot of sense for my family and our situation. We're moving further away from society and more into nature.
Right.
And I think that there is plenty for kids to grow up with and around in nature that can keep them very busy, and that can give them the confidence and skills that they need to survive socially and problem solve, and, just survive in general. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those things. I think that all of those things built up creates a situation where through the week we do the rat race. Everybody's going to bed, eating dinner at 9 p.m., going to bed super late, waking up and doing it all over again, especially if you have multiple children that are in the age of, running around and doing things. Boy Scouts is starting to fall to the wayside because it's just another thing. It's just another place you have to run to. It's another uniform you have to buy. It's another situation where you have to go sell popcorn to, make money for it. And I think we are evolving more into this like subscription lifestyle where like you need your own time to do these things. And I think my product is timely in the sense that, a box comes to your house once a month, and then you have the ability to try to figure out when to do that with your kids. And so it's about carving that time out intentionally and being present. And I hope, and I honestly believe that it will do this, is that it will give dads, moms, caregivers, whoever, permission to block out that time, because we all have it. And I think we fill it with screens. We fill it with stuff that doesn't really matter to us. And it may not be that obvious to us, but I think when people start to realize, or when dads start to realize that, hey, you know what? It really doesn't take a lot to like build connection and trust with your children. I mean, I work most of the day, and then when I go home, it's just, hey, I'm putting my phone in my glove box of my truck, and I'm just going to spend the rest of my night with my kids. I only get really like an hour and a half to 2 hours total with my kids when I go home from work. I see most dads coming home and, like, rightfully so, being very tired and wanting to just go through all of the motions. Okay, let's get bedtime going. Let's get dinner. Let's get, read books if you read books to your kids. Whatever the routine is, it's hurry up, let's get that done so we can start over the next day and get enough rest. And that has been that way in our household But the thing is that I've realized, being like an unconventionally mindseted person, is that it doesn't have to be that way. We choose for that lifestyle to be, we choose to subscribe to that lifestyle when
Right.
there are all sorts of alternate ways. And I think that's the direction that we will evolve into. We'll have to, or we won't survive as a species if we
Yeah.
don't figure out new ways to carve out presence, time, intention, connection and love with our kids. Because listen, like, AI will take over, but what it doesn't have is the emotional capacity that humans have. It
Right.
doesn't have the range of creativity that we have. And so I hope, I'm like this optimist. And I mean, if you walk around in my office and talk to everybody else up here, they'll probably have the opposite view. But my optimistic view is that all of what is happening right now with technology and AI forces us to understand that we are just all human beings with the same emotions and the same needs, and to support each other and to raise really great children. And I don't think it's hard to do. I think we just don't have a good playbook.
Yeah, I think that, especially with today's age where it's like, two parents usually like need to work. I mean, because everything is so high, right? And
Yeah.
how many parents are sitting down and eating dinner with their kids like these days,
I
and
don't know of anyone really.
and that's always so shocking to me. It's like, why are we sitting in front of a TV watching, I mean, eating, where's that connection that we're really missing? Because how do we expect our kids to have that connection when they go out and to be adults when we're not integrating that connection? We're not establishing that connection. We're not allowing them to understand what that connection is. Like my dad did a thing, and like Sundays, it was like there was no, we had to stay home on Sundays, and it was family time, and it was like, if you don't have our blood in your veins, you don't come through that door.
Yeah.
And it was for us to be able to connect and to play with each other and to, and because Monday through Friday he was working, so it was
Yeah.
like, Sundays are our days. But you don't really see that much anymore, and that family structure. And my family has a very, very solid structure to this day. We're like,
Yeah.
we call each other every day, we're talking to each other. It's funny, I said that to someone and they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, what do you mean? We're connected, we talk all the time, we're like, they're
Yeah.
just like, oh, and I'm like, when my brother calls because my nephew, like his mom might be going out of town and they need somebody, I live 3,000 miles away, I jump on a plane, I'm like, yeah, we're
Yeah.
there. It's like, but it's just, for me, it's
That's
important because that connection is just really important. Now, I want to ask you, as we're because I didn't get to ask this question yet, and I really want to ask this as we're getting towards the end of the show. Being that you help men with navigating tough transitions, how was your transition when it was out of the military into civilian life?
Yeah, it was a pretty big spectrum of just mostly disaster. It's like I struggled big time.
Okay.
And, it was all struggles that I like could not forecast or foresee happening. They all
Mhm.
just sort of like naturally occurred. And what I believe, it was like this ego that I had about myself, that I wouldn't be the victim of those things. I wouldn't
Okay.
have to deal with, like, I heard people talked about TBI and PTSD and all these things, and I just, in my mind, that was just not on my radar,
Mhm.
until it
Yeah.
was. And I think for me, and I'm not going to like project on any other stories of veterans, but I think it's fairly common for it to be like sort of this like cascade of situations, starting with like the lack of fulfillment and like the dysregulation of like, okay, you were, however many months ago you were in a team room and you were building something with a great group of guys, and now all of a sudden you're like raking your leaves in your yard, and like you don't even know who to call or who to talk to. And so it is just such an extreme deficit in terms of connection with like-minded people. I
Mhm.
think for me, realizing that, like, I moved to Bozeman like right when I got off of active duty, and like this was the greatest place in the world, but I still did not know how to make friends. It was
Okay.
still really hard for me to connect on a level with a person and have this background of intensity and like not being able to relate, I think, with people for the most part was very, very difficult because I'm a very social person. I
Okay.
love social interaction. I'm an extrovert. I want people around me. I like talking to people. And to not even know kind of how to start doing that was really difficult for me. It was very easy for me to make friends in the military. It's been
Mhm.
pretty easy for me to make friends and connections my whole life. But all of the sudden, I think I was so different than where I started that I just kind of came off the off ramp and realized I was in a totally different world. And it's shocking. It was shocking to me. So that happened, and then there's a lot of other circumstances that kind of like came into play, like TBI. Like I knew I'd been blown up a couple times, and I knew I've banged my head up a couple times. I had a parachute accident where I basically hit the road with my feet and then went straight to my head and knocked myself out. I had, an unconscious, a loss of consciousness. But, it was like, hey, I just get back up and I felt fine in a couple of days, just like you deal with
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
And how many times that I think like there's this weapon system called the Carl Gustav, and it's a recoilless rifle. It shoots what looks like kind of an RPG, and you go through all these classes that say, hey, you can only shoot 4 in a 24-hour period because of the percussion for your head and your body and all that stuff. But there was missions that we were on where we'd shoot 30 or 40 of them in one in an hour. And so it's like all that stuff, you just feel like you're tough enough and you're like built in a way that you're just going to be okay.
Yeah.
And then all that stuff shows up later and you start to feel the effects and go, well, maybe that did impact me in a way that was not so great. I started looking into, my wife has been super incredible through this whole, if it wasn't for her, there's no way I would be talking to you like this and in the situation that I'm in now, because she's so unconventional in terms of like medical research and holistic care. And when I got out of the army, especially in the special forces, I was like anti-hippie. Like anything that was like woo or spiritual or didn't have like a bunch of science behind it, I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And she was like, well, maybe you should try like probiotics or go see a naturopath. And I'm like, dude, they don't know what they're talking about. And it took me a few years to actually like finally fold and go see a naturopath. Turns out I had like hyperpituitaryism. So I had inflammation in my pituitary gland, which caused a lot of hormonal issues. Turns out I was severely allergic to potatoes, but I was still eating them. And so I was constantly sick, constantly in a ton of like chronic pain. And I was just living with it. I honestly, I mean, I can put myself back in those shoes. I just thought that's where I was in life. And I thought I just needed to keep powering. And so I had never really put an emphasis on health and wellness. I was always just naturally okay. I was physical, but I never really did the other things that you're supposed to do, like
Right.
eating right and stretching and taking care of yourself in all the different ways. I had a bit of an issue with alcohol coming out of the military that any other alcoholic, I didn't believe I had a problem with alcohol. And looking back on how much I consumed every night was like, holy shit, I can't imagine even having a drink now. Like I'll have a beer every now and then, but it's like I am so far away from that in this moment. So my wife really helped me just kind of like prioritize my health in all these different like holistic ways that I was not open to. And she luckily is like, a formidable woman that has a lot of force behind her that can like say, no, you're going to do this. I finally listened. And since then, I've really been able to start taking care of myself. One thing that happened that's worth talking about is that, I was struggling with the TBI stuff and didn't realize it, and I had a friend from First Special Forces group that was driving out with me and my family. And he stayed with us for probably about a week. And I came home from the gym one day and he like had a intervention set up in my living room with like my wife. And it's like, I could tell that like we were going to talk about something. It was like sort of awkward. And he was basically like, dude, I see you and I see the way that you're reacting and like your just like mannerisms in general. He's like, I think you need to go see this guy. His name is Dr. Mark Gordon, and he deals with veterans with traumatic brain injury. Because of who told me to do it, which was a really respected friend, I went and did it. And I think that was like on a Saturday. And then on Sunday, Dr. Gordon we were doing a FaceTime and he was like ready to help me right away. And so that was one really big like turning point, because all that he did was he took my blood, he showed me all of my markers. And then when I saw that sheet with all of my vitals and all of my, markers on it, I was amazed. Like my vitamin D was 0. My cortisol levels were like 14 times what they, should be. My testosterone was only around 250, which I should have been in like the 700-800 range. Everything was off. Everything. And it's like, he looked at me and was like, Aaron, if you stay on this trajectory, you're going to die. Like, it's like your body is like fighting itself constantly to survive. He put me on a protocol of just like natural supplements that are over the counter. You can buy at GNC. And within probably 3 to 4 weeks, I noticed a tremendous change. I felt like myself again. I was like waking up feeling decent. I had more clarity. I just like my skin started to look better, like all of these things very quickly. I've been on that protocol for probably 5-6 years now, and it just continues to get better. Every 6 months, I do a blood test. He comes back with markers and says, you need more of this, you need less of this. He is an absolute like giant brain. I can't understand anything that he tells me, but I just trust him at this point. Like, the proof is like what I feel and look like right now compared to what I was like when I transitioned out of the military. And so I am way more physically capable, way more clear headed, way more grounded than I have ever been. And I'm truly grateful that I had a friend, come and sit me down and say, listen, dude, you need to get your shit together. And it worked. That was one big turning point. I've gone towards like everything that I can to try to support my health, my mental health, my physical wellness, my spirituality, all that stuff. And then I would say the next thing that contributed to where I'm at now was I took a chance on plant medicine, and I went down to Mexico with a veteran organization to do some psychedelic therapy. Without being like super dramatic about it, I would say that it turned my life around more than any one.
So many veterans on the show that say that they talk about that experience.
It was tremendous. I don't know that it's for everyone. It definitely was for me. I cannot put into words what it did for me. And I'm still, that was 3 years ago. No, 4 years ago. And I'm like still in it. I'm like still riding the wave of like self-love, whatever you want to call it, spirituality, inspiration, gratitude. It's all around me still after spending 10 days in the jungle.
Wow. Yeah, no, I hear really amazing things. And I love that, the transition was hard and you went this route and now you're helping other people do it. I think that's pretty awesome. That's incredible. So the final question that I have for the show is, what do you have for our listeners that we could do on a daily basis that could help us face the challenges that are inevitably going to come?
Yeah, that's a great question. Multiple different answers, but the number one thing that I would say has worked for me is to sit down and really come up with what your personal values are. And that's something that you can do in an afternoon or in a day. And then what you can do daily is embody and live those values as good as you can each day. That will set you up for success. And it won't set you up for happiness, but it will set you up for peace. And that is the only thing that I'm chasing these days, because I believe that happiness is a total trap. But in terms of being able to consciously sit down and say, what is a value of mine and why? And then just formulate 4 or 5 of those and just do them. Just live. Ask yourself everything that you do. Am I living by this value? Am I sacrificing this value? Or am I grappling with this value? And like really sit with it and try to understand it and then sharpen that over time. Our values are up on the refrigerator. We have personal values at home, and then we have family values. And we can always point up to those things with the kids, and they came up with them. That's what's even better, is when you can empower, and if people are listening that have kids, empower your kids to come up with their own values and then hold them accountable for the things that they come up with. They don't care about yours. And I don't care about anybody else's. I just care about mine.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much. You were incredible. I really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I love what you're doing, and I'd love to stay in touch. So thanks for having me.
Definitely. Thank you. And everyone that's listening, please like, share, comment, subscribe, become a Substack member. It's really fun over there. We got some podcast chapters that only our Substack members get. And I'll see you guys all next Wednesday. Thank you so much.